New York City is in chaos. Millions of commuters are trapped underground, and the city's subway system, the lifeblood of the metropolis, has collapsed. Trains are stopped mid, escalators are frozen, and stations are packed with sweltering, desperate people. For the first time in decades, the city that never sleeps is truly paralyzed. Mayor Zohran Mamdani is under fire as emergency alerts flood every screen. New Yorkers are facing temperatures well over 90 degrees in crowded, poorly ventilated tunnels. Hospital report staff unable to reach patients, children are stuck with no air conditioning, and office buildings are empty as workers can't get to their jobs. The subway collapse isn't just inconvenient, and buses are overflowing as desperate New Yorkers try to escape the gridlock. Entire neighborhoods have been cut off from essential services, creating a crisis that touches every corner of the city. Footage shows commuters trapped in stations with no water, no air circulation, and no clear information from authorities. The frustration and fear are palpable. "I've never seen anything like this," said one commuter stranded in Times Square. "People are panicking, sweating, and some are even fainting. We don't know how long this will last." Social media is overflowing with viral videos of chaos underground, angered residents calling for immediate action, and the hashtag #NYC subway collapse trending worldwide. The scale of the disaster is almost unimaginable. Unlike a localized blackout or a storm, the subway system touches nearly every borough, every business, and every resident. Emergency response teams are stretched thin, with firefighters, police, and medical personnel struggling to reach trapped passengers. Even hospitals report delays in ambulances reaching critical care patients. This isn't just a transit failure, it's a citywide emergency that threatens lives and livelihoods. Mayor Mamdani has publicly promised a rapid response, but the anger is spreading. Questions are being raised about decades of deferred maintenance, budget mismanagement, and ignored warnings from transportation experts. Critics are calling this disaster a predictable catastrophe, one that could have been avoided with proper investment and oversight. Yet here the city stands, paralyzed, vulnerable, and furious. The financial impact is immediate. Businesses dependent on daily foot traffic report losses already in the hundreds of millions, and the economic engine of New York is grinding to a halt. Tourists stranded at airports and hotels add another layer of strain, while stock markets and local commerce feel the shockwaves. The city's reputation as a resilient global hub is now under scrutiny, millions are watching, and New York's iconic image is tarnished by gridlock, heat, and chaos. This is more than a system failure. It's a crisis that touches every New Yorker personally, whether stranded underground, stuck on overcrowded buses, or watching the city crumble around them. And while Mayor Mamdani scrambles to respond, millions are left asking how that prides itself on efficiency and resilience could fall apart so completely. The shocking reality is undeniable. The subway collapse isn't just an inconvenience. It's a disaster that exposes systemic failures, threatens public safety, and paralyzes the economy. And what you're seeing right now is just the surface of a much deeper problem. The story behind this collapse, why it happened, who allowed it, and how far-reaching the consequences will be, is far more disturbing than any commuter could imagine. New York City's subway collapse didn't happen overnight. This disaster is decades in the making, a ticking time bomb fueled by neglect, mismanagement, and political compromise. Beneath the surface of crowded stations and stalled trains lies a network strained beyond its limits, and the people in charge, from Mayor Zohran Mamdani to MTA executives, ignored countless warnings. The infrastructure itself is staggering in age. Nearly 40% of the subway tunnels are over 100 years old, with some lines still running on century-old tracks and signaling equipment. Rusted steel, outdated electrical systems, and crumbling concrete have all contributed to a fragile network that could barely withstand normal demand, let alone the extreme pressures of the past week. For years, transportation experts have sounded the alarm. Reports from the MTA Inspector General and independent analysts warned that deferred maintenance and budget shortfalls could trigger catastrophic failures. Yet these warnings were largely ignored, delayed, or buried beneath political red tape. Funding proposals for essential upgrades were repeatedly postponed, with millions instead allocated to cosmetic projects and high-profile initiatives that offered little real safety benefit. Budget mismanagement and political priorities created a perfect storm. The city poured billions into expansion plans and public-facing projects, while critical repairs were left unfunded. Signals that control train movement were left outdated, emergency ventilation systems were underfunded, and station electrical upgrades were repeatedly deferred. The risk wasn't hypothetical, it was documented, studied, and repeatedly flagged to city and state officials. Even the most basic safety measures were overlooked. Emergency drills, evacuation protocols, and equipment inspections were inconsistent or skipped entirely. During peak hours, stations operate at over 150% capacity, making them tinderboxes for panic during delays or failures. Experts had warned that one significant breakdown could trigger cascading delays, stranded passengers, and potentially life-threatening situations, and that's exactly what unfolded. Political decisions also played a key role. The financial model of the MTA itself adds another layer of vulnerability. Reliance on fares, fluctuating state support, and complex debt obligations has left the subway system chronically underfunded, while consultants, contractors, and corporate partners were often prioritized over practical safety improvements. For decades, profit politics and public relations have outweighed operational resilience. The truth that most New Yorkers don't see is even more unsettling. This system collapse was predictable. Internal reports, whistleblower accounts, and leaked memos repeatedly warned city officials that extreme weather, surges in ridership, or minor equipment failures could lead to a total gridlock. Every signal left outdated, every tunnel deferred for repair, and every ignored warning made this collapse not just possible, but inevitable. And yet, the public was left in the dark. Commuters were never informed about the severity of risks. Evacuation plans were unclear, safety warnings were minimal. When disaster struck, the chaos was amplified because millions were unprepared for a scenario that officials had seen coming for years. Now, as stranded passengers struggle and the city reels, the shocking question: could a city remains? How could a city that prides itself on resilience and world-class infrastructure fall apart so completely? The collapse is more than a technical failure. It is a revelation of decades of negligence, political dysfunction, and misplaced priorities. The consequences are unfolding right now, affecting lives, businesses, and the city's economy. And while the causes are complex, the next step is clear: uncover exactly who allowed this disaster to happen, and examine the human and economic fallout that is gripping every borough. New York City is grinding to a halt. Millions of commuters are stranded, trains sit abandoned in tunnels, and the streets are overflowing with frustrated, desperate residents. This isn't a temporary delay, it's a full-blown disaster affecting lives, livelihoods, and the economy. The human toll is immediate, terrifying, and undeniable. Take Maria Alvarez, a nurse in Queens. She spends over 5 hours crawling through a sweltering, dark tunnel just to get to the hospital. Meanwhile, patients in critical condition wait for care that may never arrive on time. Children are stuck in stations with no air conditioning, elderly commuters collapse from heat exhaustion, and parents frantically try to rescue their families from the chaos. These aren't isolated stories, they're happening across every borough, from the Bronx to Brooklyn, and the economic consequences are staggering. Businesses that rely on daily commuter facing unprecedented losses. Restaurants in Midtown are empty, retail stores report billions lost in sales, and offices have closed for the day because workers simply can't get there. Stock traders and corporate employees are stuck above ground or underground, disrupting Wall Street's delicate rhythm and threatening multi-million-dollar deals. Tourism suffers, travelers abandon plans, and airports overflow with frustrated visitors. The financial engine of New York, once unstoppable, is faltering before our eyes. The chaos extends to transportation above ground. Buses are packed beyond capacity, streets are gridlocked, and taxis and ride shares charge outrageous prices as desperate residents scramble to move. Roads that should take 15 minutes now take hours, emergency vehicles get stuck in traffic, and the city teeters on the edge of complete paralysis. Every hour of delay intensifies the crisis, straining families, businesses, and public services. The emotional toll cannot be overstated. Anger and panic dominate subway stations as residents confront the reality of their vulnerability. Social media is flooded with viral videos showing crowded platforms, passengers fainting from heat exhaustion, and commuters yelling at officials who offer no answers. The hashtag NYC subway collapse is trending globally, reflecting not just local outrage but international shock at how quickly a city of millions can be brought to its knees. Hospitals, already overwhelmed, now face critical staffing shortages. Emergency services struggle to reach patients, and ambulances are delayed by hours as gridlock grips Manhattan streets. Vulnerable populations, children, elderly, and those with medical conditions, are at extreme risk. Lives hang in the balance because the system designed to move millions safely and efficiently has utterly failed, and the financial ripple is felt across the nation. New York City contributes hundreds of billions annually to the U.S. economy. A paralyzed subway system doesn't just affect local businesses, it disrupts supply chains, stock markets, and nationwide commerce. Hotels lose revenue, delivery services stall, and office buildings lie empty. The subway collapse is no longer a city problem, it's a national economic crisis in slow motion. Political consequences are mounting. Citizens are calling for immediate accountability from Mayor Zohran Mamdani, the MTA leadership, and the state oversight committees. Protests erupt in Times Square, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. Lawmakers are pressed to answer why decades of warnings were ignored and why no preventative action was taken. The tension between public outrage and political inaction is palpable, leaving New Yorkers asking a simple yet terrifying question: who will take responsibility before the next disaster strikes? The human and economic fallout of this subway collapse is vast, personal, and ongoing. Entire neighborhoods are disrupted, millions of lives are thrown into chaos, and billions of dollars are at risk. The reality is clear: this disaster is not an accident. It is the consequence of decades of neglect, mismanagement, and political inaction, and its impact will ripple through every corner of the city. As the dust settles above ground, one chilling truth remains: millions are still trapped, physically, financially, and emotionally, in the wake of a crisis that was entirely preventable. The coming revelations about leadership failures, ignored warnings, and the full cost of this disaster are going to shock every New Yorker and the world. The New York City subway collapse isn't just a failure of infrastructure, it's a failure of leadership. As millions of commuters suffer, eyes turn sharply toward Mayor Zohran Mamdani, the MTA executives, and the state oversight committees that were supposed to prevent this disaster. The truth is harsh: this catastrophe didn't just happen, it was allowed to happen. For years, internal reports warned of failing tracks, aging signals, and deteriorating tunnels. Memos highlighted corrosion, electrical hazards, and the urgent need for upgrades, yet crucial maintenance was delayed, deferred, or ignored. Documents obtained by investigative journalists reveal that millions were allocated to superficial station improvements and PR campaigns, while emergency systems and signal upgrades, the backbone of the subway's safety, went unfunded. The contrast is staggering: flashy renovations above ground while underground, the system was falling apart. Mayor Mamdani inherited a complex web of warnings and a network on the brink of collapse. Critics argue that his administration failed to prioritize safety, choosing political ops over urgent action. Press conferences, statements of rapid response, and promises of reform have done little to restore confidence. Residents are asking, how can a city that claims to be prepared allow its subway system to fail so completely during peak usage? The controversy extends far beyond City Hall. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority leadership is under fire for ignored inspections, delayed upgrades, and poor crisis planning. Reports show that critical signal updates were postponed to meet budget constraints, and emergency ventilation systems were left inoperable for months. Some insiders suggest that subcontractors and consultants were hired more for political visibility than practical improvements, a system where profit politics and appearances took precedence over public safety. The fallout from political mismanagement is visible everywhere. Commuters are trapped in tunnels, streets are clogged with desperate traffic, and emergency services are struggling to respond. Protesters swarm station entrances, chanting for accountability. Social media posts show viral footage of stranded passengers clashing with MTA staff, anger boiling over into chaos. New Yorkers aren't just upset, they are enraged, and their outrage is focused squarely on those in power. Even state oversight hasn't escaped scrutiny. Questions are being raised about whether regulators adequately monitored the subway system, or if bureaucratic inefficiency allowed warnings to pile up unread. Investigations are beginning to uncover a culture of complacency, where reports of danger were met with bureaucracy rather than immediate action. Every delayed repair, every ignored warning, every mismanaged budget contributed directly to the disaster playing out across the city today. The contrast is stark. While millions of New Yorkers suffer underground, leaders continue to make statements that often feel disconnected from reality. "We're investigating," and "we're committed to improvements," echo through press conferences, but the tangible results are nowhere to be seen. Residents watch helplessly, knowing that the next delay or collapse could be far worse, and the controversy doesn't stop there. Some critics point fingers at political conflicts between the city and state, which have created paralysis in decision-making. Funding disputes, oversight battles, and power struggles have left the MTA caught between politicians rather than focused on public safety. This infighting has real consequences: delayed safety improvements, stalled maintenance, and millions of lives put at risk. The shocking reality is undeniable: the subway collapse is as much a political crisis as it is an infrastructural one. It exposes decades of mismanagement, a failure of leadership, and a lack of accountability at every level. And while millions of commuters suffer, those responsible continue to occupy positions of power. The question now isn't whether officials will face scrutiny, it's how long it will take before New Yorkers demand real, enforceable action. The system is broken, trust is shattered, and every delayed decision magnifies the stakes. The city's survival depends not only on repairing tunnels and signals but on confronting the leadership failures that allowed this disaster to happen in the first place. The subway collapse is far from over. As New Yorkers struggle today, the long-term consequences are already stacking up, and the truth is terrifying. What happened this week is only a glimpse of what the future could hold if systemic failures continue unchecked. Experts warn that decades of deferred maintenance and crumbling infrastructure have left New York City vulnerable to repeated disasters. Signals could fail again, tunnels could flood, and entire lines could be paralyzed without warning. By 2030, some projections suggest up to half of the subway network could be at risk of catastrophic failure if funding, oversight, and leadership don't change. Millions of commuters would be trapped underground, and the city's economy could grind to a halt. The human cost could escalate dramatically. Imagine children stuck in stifling stations, hospitals unable to receive patients, and commuters forced into unsafe tunnels. Heat waves, storms, or even minor technical malfunctions could amplify chaos, turning a delay into a city-wide emergency. Every minute in action from Mayor Zohran Mamdani and MTA leadership increases the likelihood of disaster repeating itself. The city is walking a fine line between temporary paralysis and total infrastructure collapse. Economically, the stakes are just as severe. New York City is the financial engine of the United States. The subway system moves millions of people who power Wall Street, tourist retail, and essential services. Every disruption causes cascading losses. Hotels lose revenue, offices go idle, deliveries stall, and retail sales plummet. If this crisis repeats annually, experts predict tens of billions in lost revenue, with consequences felt nationwide. The collapse isn't just local, it's a threat to the national economy. Politically, the fallout is unavoidable. Citizens are watching and growing impatient. Protests have erupted across every borough, demanding accountability and immediate action. Social media is flooded with viral videos exposing the human suffering caused by the collapse, amplifying public outrage globally. And while officials promise investigations and reforms, skepticism runs deep. New Yorkers aren't just angry, they're terrified that the next disaster could be worse. The collapse also highlights deeper societal issues. Public trust in leadership is at an all-time low as decades of deferred decisions, budget mismanagement, and political infighting have culminated in a crisis that affects everyone from daily commuters to essential workers. The public is demanding answers: who is responsible, who will fix it, and how much longer will lives remain at risk. Worst-case scenarios are already being calculated. Experts warn of complete gridlock during storms, floods, or heat waves. Entire neighborhoods could be isolated, emergency services blocked, and millions stranded underground. Hospitals, schools, and essential services could face disruption that puts lives in immediate danger. If nothing changes, the human and economic fallout will only escalate. And yet, despite the scale of this disaster, action remains slow. The city faces a choice: continue down the path of neglect and bureaucracy, or make the tough decisions needed to overhaul the system before it's too late. Every day without decisive action increases the odds of another catastrophic failure. The clock is ticking, and New Yorkers are watching every move of Mayor Mamdani, MTA leaders, and state officials. The question isn't whether the subway system will face another crisis, it's how severe the next one will be, and how many lives will be affected. The collapse has already shown that failure is deadly, but the coming months and years could push the city to the brink. Citizens, commuters, and business owners are all asking, will leadership finally take responsibility, or will the cycle of neglect continue? One thing is certain: this disaster will be remembered not just as a subway collapse, but as a warning for the future. Every decision, every delay, and every ignored warning has consequences, and if lessons aren't learned now, the next collapse will be far worse.